Hi, and thank you for joining me. Today is November 1st. We're 2 days away from a presidential election in the United States. So I wanted to do a show all about what is going on right now, including showing you state by state scenarios and swing states and whatnot. Before that, let's go over what we're going to talk about today so you can see if that's of any interest to you and if you think you can gain value from this episode. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Michael Jordan, image versus reality, just to show you that in politics as well as in sports and in anything else, there's a brand and there's the real person, and somewhere in the middle is, or I should say, there's the image of the person, there's the intimate, the person with himself, and then there's the marriage of those two, which ends up being the real person, the person that you actually can judge by results. So the image is not the truth. His inner self is not the real truth, because obviously somebody can be very insecure and then go out on the court and explode. So results are always the best way to measure things. I'm going to show you Obama versus image versus reality, just to give people an idea 2 days before they vote for either Trump or Biden, what is the image versus reality and how it is portrayed in the media, and creates reality. It is a creation of reality because it's not the truth, and people should discern that. And obviously, anything, any business, any corporation, any election is trending on that line between how much time people would actually spend learning about the truth and how can we blast some images or some slogans to them so that they can easily make a choice and be satisfied and just justify that with themselves, because that's basically what happens with most choices that we make. We try to make them as quickly as possible, and we don't have the time and we can't prioritize to learn everything about everything. So we have to trust a source, and that is what media and marketing is all about: getting a trust factor involved and then creating some sort of an image for a brand. And then we're going to talk about what voters get, the black and white versus the truth that is always more complex. What do you get with the Biden victory? What do you get with a Trump victory? How will America look like? And then let's talk about overarching trends that are never reversed by a president. So a president can definitely impact things that are already in motion, but he doesn't create them, doesn't end them for the most part, unless something very drastic happens. And then let's talk about the elections breakdown. Let's see who votes what, and you can then comment in the section below if you think the swing states, where do you think they're going? And we shall see on Wednesday if your predictions were right. So let's jump right into it. And I'd like to show you the difference between today and the 1990s. So today, if you look at, for example, President Obama, he spent a lot of years building his brand. You can look at how Jerry Seinfeld is here, he's working in the Oval Office, and Jerry invites him to go in this classic car, which was in Seinfeld's episodes. President Trump doesn't do that kind of stuff. His image and what he wants to project is different than what Obama wanted to project, and that is an image. This is image work. This is not the way Obama really is. Now, at some points in this interview, obviously his real self comes out, but he always has in mind that he has to present an image, and that's what he does. So just remember that. That is very important to understand. You're not getting the real man at any point. He wears a suit. He has this kind of a laughing factor. It's not all an act, but it is he's in a very calculated state in order to deliver his message of how he wants to be portrayed in terms of character, how he wants to be portrayed as a leader, as a president. He would shift between being funny and being serious. There's all sorts of things that he does, and that is what a leader does. He needs to change his tune according to what he thinks is going to get the best result. But just remember that the entire setup, that Jerry Seinfeld comes in with a very positive atmosphere into this also sets the tone for Jerry Seinfeld fans to say, okay, Jerry accepts him, therefore I can accept him. Same thing with Ellen, and let's make sure we credit the whoever created this video. Look at this. This is Michelle Obama dancing while she was first lady, and it's all smiles and giggles. She goes on to do an interview, and then there's more dancing and whatnot. So just remember, Melania Trump obviously doesn't do that kind of stuff. Michelle did all sorts of things, but that is also, it's an image factor. That may have been the last ever dance that she did in that year, and she may not be even a dancer, et cetera, et cetera. That is what I mean by an image. Now, things today, because of social media, are much different than in the 90s. For example, when I was looking at Michael Jordan in the 90s, I didn't know about him hitting Steve Kerr in practice. That came out, at least in my life, that knowledge with the Netflix series The Last Dance, which showed intimate interviews with teammates and what Michael Jordan was really like compared to what I saw. I saw this, number 23, invincible, etc. as a child, and that's the brand that got me to buy his sneakers, his t-shirts and whatnot, but I didn't know this competitive spirit that he had about him, that a lot of players complained about. What we saw in the 90s, because there was no social media and there was no explosion in content as there is today, it was very easy to create this sort of an image. And here's what we saw as kids. We saw Space Jam, right? We saw him being a hero and playing in these games. Now, that is what we remember, and that is ingrained in us. That is an image. That is not the real man. As you can see, for example, here in The Last Dance, you can see areas where during practice, he would insult and bully his teammates, and he's not apologetic about it. Here he's kind of taunting a teammate, and then he's not apologetic about it. Here, look at this. Woo. And Scott Burrell was in this show portrayed as a person, a teammate that got a lot of the bullying, etc. And what Jordan says is that's the kind of leader I felt I should be. I should pound these teammates so that they will be ready for war, ready for the playoffs, etc. Which I have no issue with, but it's very different than the person I thought he was. I didn't know this aspect about him. That has opened my mind to that, and that is the key. The results is what you actually can look at and see if you want to vote for a particular person or want to be associated with a particular person, because you will never know the intimate side of anyone, and you can't trust the image. So that is a little bit about image versus marketing and whatnot. I also like this clip because it shows Jordan on The Last Dance laughing at a comment made by Gary Payton, who he plays in the finals against in 1996 with the Seattle Supersonics. Gary Payton's nickname was the Glove, and he was the best defensive player of his era. Here, Gary Payton is saying, I think I did a great job of guarding him. And Michael Jordan's famous line from this clip is, I had no problem with the glove. So in other words, I could beat him. And that's his mentality, which is very, winner. I can win against anybody. Let's talk a little bit about the elections and what's going on right now. So a record turnout of voting happening around the United States. The ease of mail-in votes is allowing many people to express their opinions where they might have otherwise just stayed home. A lot of the conclusions that the Democrats had after 2016 was that the polls that showed this big gap, big lead, kind of created an indifference with many people that thought, well, Hillary's going to win this because she's a Clinton, she has all the experience, Donald Trump is a TV persona, but he's not, he has no political experience, and they didn't factor in how much love he was getting on alternative media and not on the legacy media, the CNNs and the CNBCs, etc. So let's look at the current state of affairs. Blue states are California, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington State, and Illinois, New Mexico, New York, DC, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Virginia, comprised of 200 electoral votes, electoral college votes. Now, you need 270, which is just over half of the 538 total electoral college votes. Who's going to vote Republican? Oklahoma, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Montana, Alaska, and Indiana. Those are 111. So right off the bat, the states that would vote Democrat versus Republican are much more, 89 electoral votes more, electoral college votes more than the Republicans, but then you have a lot of swing states. So these are made up of what the polls currently say. They say that Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Wisconsin, and Michigan are tilting towards Democrats. Many people are saying that these are wrong, and many people on the ground these days saying that these are wrong. Florida is a battleground, and it's right in the middle. New Hampshire, North Carolina also going right now, as according to the polls, to the Democrats. Georgia is a real battleground. Iowa, Ohio is going to tilt towards the Republicans. South Carolina towards the Republicans. Minnesota is a battleground. Kansas towards the Republicans. Pennsylvania, big battleground. Maine towards Democrats, and Texas towards Republicans. That's 227 electoral college votes right there, and that these states will impact who's going to win. And I want to talk a little bit about this, because in a democracy, every vote counts. That's true, but every vote doesn't have the same weight. As you can see, if, for example, in California, 3 or 4 or 5 million people would vote for Trump, they would mean nothing for California, because there's almost 100% guarantee that it will be a blue state. So all of these votes basically are buried in them. Trump doesn't even campaign in California, neither does Biden, because he feels like that's not a great use of his time, because he feels like he's a shoo-in there. So the electoral college votes, what they create is a situation where both candidates would focus and would go 30 or more times to Florida, where they need to win, but they will not campaign and don't give priority or treatment to California voters, because the result is pretty much set. That is one of the big problems with it. There's other big problems, and I want to show you what's interesting about them. For one, the way that these are created is, for example, Texas with 38 is because they have 36 congressmen plus 2 senators. That's how they get to the 38. A state like New Hampshire has 2 congressmen and 2 senators. But what ends up happening is that if you take a state like Texas, every 600,000 or 700,000 votes impact one delegate, one of these electoral college votes. Whereas small states, 300,000 votes or 350,000 votes get you that same one delegate. Their impact on the election is bigger. So not every vote is the same. There's a lot of weight to which state you live, because you only, as a resident of that state, control the outcome of that particular state. The other interesting part about it is when we say California or New York is a blue state, well, it's very misleading, because you have to remember that 40% of the voters in New York are going to vote for Trump. It's not like it's a blue state 100%. It's just going to have that result, because if you even win by one vote, you get the state. And that's how President Trump did win 2016. By slim margins, it's said that around 77,000 people out of 330 million citizens, or out of 125, 130 million voters, 77,000, they were the ones determining the outcome of who's going to be president. And that's really interesting with this sort of vote. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about the markets, because the volatility index actually closed above 40 on October 28th, if I'm not mistaken. And that is a very high read. Now I want to show you something that's eerily similar between 1930 and courtesy to Zero Hedge. And today, look at the Dow Jones back then and now. So a lot of people have been comparing this for months and months and months, even going back to March, with the idea that, hey, there was a bounce and then coronavirus. There was a rally, coronavirus took it down. This is March. And then there's the rebound, which is called, if it goes back down, it's called a dead cat bouncing. And then there's this. So is this going to happen? I will give you the opinions for yes and no. For one, we're not in the same environment. Back then, the Federal Reserve and the government did not act as aggressively, as quickly, as timely, and with the same amount of, I would say, aggressiveness as they just did now. Secondly, we've seen this time around action around the globe. The third thing is, this in 1921 was a financial crisis originating from speculation and other financial issues that were at the time. Coronavirus is a healthcare issue that trickled into the economy because we had to lock down entire countries. So it's a secondary layer of a crisis. Thirdly, interest rates are definitely in a different world. We are not in the same environment where back then there was a gold standard. Today there is no gold standard, so you can create currency freely, and that plays into it as well. And then the last thing that we need to think about are these many new institutions that are now part of our economy that were not back then. So back then, in the 1930s, you had 4,000 to 5,000 banks in America, and the experience of going to a branch or to a certain bank and having it closed, and then opening a new account with another bank and having that one closed, there was about 4,000 bank failures in the 30s in the United States. That does not happen now. The experience is very different. For the average person, he doesn't see the crisis full-blown and everywhere he goes, because it isn't. There's a lot of, there's the federally insured bank accounts, and then there's a lot of regulation in place to make sure that banking system doesn't collapse, even in these kinds of situations. And then there are these institutions like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds that have trillions of dollars in cash, and therefore the leverage component that was very prevalent in the late 1920s is not the same as it is today. There is a lot of debt on the sovereign level and at the corporate level, but within the investment community, there wasn't a lot of crazy speculation going into this period. So an expensive stock market, yes, but definitely not excessive risk taking. And another thing I'd like to leave you with is that this week was the the worst performing week of a pre-election ever. Also, something that is very indicative of who's going to win elections. In the last 3 months before an election, if the markets are down, you've never had a situation where a sitting president won. As we speak, The markets closed at minus 0.6%, where the S&P 500 did for the months of August, September, and October. So that would mean a Biden victory. We shall see if that will happen. And I hope you enjoyed this. The next one will be right after we have a winner for this elections. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for trusting in how we report, and hope you're getting value from these. And I'll see you in the next one.